I love women's session, y'all. I've been doing conferences forever, and some people are like kind of over it. Oh, I just love it so much. And maybe part of it is because my life is basically a women's session. So I have one daughter, and then I had another daughter, and then I had another daughter, and then we eventually had our son. And so when I was pregnant with my second child, my oldest daughter, Maria, all she wanted in the whole world was a baby sister. Like, this had to be a girl. So we go and we have the ultrasound, find out, yes, indeed, it is a girl. Well, as I'm getting closer to my due date, and I'm like hormonal, and I'm emotional, and I'm kind of a wreck, well, my friend Bob Rice, he was also, you guys know Bob, yes. So Bob, they were also expecting a baby girl. And they also had a daughter named Maria who's 3 years old, just like my daughter. So they go to the hospital and they have their baby, and wow, they have a baby brother. So they bring home this baby, and their daughter is like so angry. She's like, "Stop calling my sister a brother, take him back." So I start freaking out, all right? I'm freaking out. This is totally going to happen to us. This is going to happen to my daughter. She's going to need therapy. She's going to grow up to be a serial killer, all of these things. I'm having all these like emotional, hormonal thoughts, right? And so I decide I need to sit her down and have a conversation, just to mentally prepare her, right? So I'm like, okay, Maria, I want to talk to you about something. What if on the day that the baby's born, we go to the hospital and, they're like, uh-oh, we were wrong. It's a baby boy. She looked at me with her big brown eyes. She's like, can that happen? It's like, well, probably not, but it's a possibility. It'd be totally fine. It's totally okay. We just need to get like some boy clothes, some boy toys. We love him so much. It'd be so great. She's like, okay. She like goes back to playing. I'm like, oh, okay, no problem. She comes back a few minutes later and she's like, Mom, I was thinking, what if on the day that the baby's born, we go to the hospital and the doctor says, uh-oh, we were wrong. It's a baby grandma. I think we would have bigger problems than like boy toys, boy clothes, So the baby comes and we're, no surprises, no surprise boys, no surprise senior citizens. Everything goes exactly as we had thought. But I remember thinking during that time, it's so crazy. Like, your whole life, like babies come from their moms and all that. But when it happens to you, when you are pregnant and there is a person living inside of your body, there is nothing weirder that you will experience in your entire life. And it's so crazy to think, like, eventually at some point you have your ultrasound, maybe you find out the gender, that if it's a boy or a girl, you name them, you know their name, but you don't know anything else about them. And I remember thinking that every time that I was pregnant, like, there's a person that lives inside my body. I don't know what they look like. I don't know what their personality is like. I know nothing about them. They're a complete stranger, yet they live inside my body. So strange, And what's even crazier is you can go back to the very beginning and think about for weeks and weeks and weeks, that baby was there. And I had no idea. Several weeks pass when you're pregnant before you even have an idea that there's a human being inside of you, and that there was a person, an eternal soul, a heartbeat inside of me, and it didn't change anything about my life. It didn't change what I talked about, what I thought about, the decisions that I made, the plans that I was making for the future. It made no difference whatsoever. But the fact that I didn't know it, I didn't acknowledge it, I had no idea, didn't make it any less true. And now, y'all, when we think about this, and we think about the God of the universe, right? By virtue of your baptism, that at your baptism, God created you, recreated your soul to be pure and good and holy. That he made you to be this gift that had such worth and such dignity that the God of the universe that could have chosen anywhere to live, anywhere to exist, anywhere to have his being, chose as his dwelling place your heart. And my friends, whether you feel it, whether you know it, whether you experience it, whether it changes the things that you think about, the things that you talk about, the decisions that you make, it doesn't make it any less true. And our goal here this morning is not to talk about things that we should do or shouldn't do or anything like that. Our goal here this morning is that you will fall in love. That you will fall in love with that presence of Jesus within you that makes you who you are. When I was a youth minister many years ago, we would go to conferences like this, and we would go to the women's session, and I've never been to a men's session before. I have no idea what they talk about. All I know is that they come out and they're like grunting, and they're so excited about like being a man of God. Like they're ready to go out and like kill their own meat and live in the jungle and be a man of God, you know? So these girls and I were talking in my office after some conferences and stuff, and we were talking like my teens, like what does it mean to be a woman of God? And we were thinking about like the imagery of what that is. We were thinking of, you know, like never cutting our hair again, never wearing pants, like only wearing like long floral skirts and churning butter. Like that was like the main image, you know? And if that's how you feel called to live your life, like there's no judgment whatsoever, but there's nothing me personally about that makes me like, sign me up for that, you know? So we're like, all right, let's talk about what it is to be a woman of God. And so we started naming all of these things about how when Jesus comes into our lives, like how it changes us, how it turns us into the people that we want to be. Not only that, but it gives us a purpose for our lives. It's a reason to wake up in the morning, that we have this joy. We want to share it with other people naturally, that you have this joy and this love that's overflowing out of yourself, and that you want to tell other people about it. It gives your life meaning. It makes you feel like, oh my gosh, this is what I was made for. And we realized as we were talking about all of these things, this is exactly what we would describe as if we were talking about a woman who had fallen in love. That when we fall in love, that it should make us the better version of ourselves, that it overflows out of us, that the Dr. Seuss quote, you know that you're in love when you're excited to wake up in the morning because your life is better than your dreams. And we were like, this is what it is. To be a woman of God is really to be a woman in love. A woman in love, and we as girls, like, we love love, like there's something about it that makes our heart so alive. If you're at your best friend's house and it's 3:00 in the morning and you're spending the night, what are you talking about? Boys, exactly. Like we want to talk about love, we want to hear it, we want to experience it. Like this is why there could be a whole genre called chick flicks. Like we love love, And I think that God designed us really in particular in that way, that we'll be searching and looking for his presence within us to fall in love, to find him, to say, I am the man of your dreams. One of these girls who was in my office that day, and we started, making this a thing, that we would talk about being a woman in love. And she went off to college, graduated from college, and one night she was at a party, and a secular party. She was with some friends, and they met this group of guys. So they're talking with him for a while, and this guy's kind of looking at her, kind of strange. And eventually he's like, can I ask you a question? Are you dating anyone? She's like, no, I am not. And he's like, are you like engaged? Are you like about to be married? Like, what's the thing? She's like, no, I'm extremely single. Like, why are you asking me this question? And he was like, I don't know, you just carry yourself like somebody who's in love. Like you have that kind of glow about you, like the way that you act like you're somebody who's in love. And she was so excited. She's like, let me tell you about my friend Jesus. And so she called me afterwards and she's like, it's a real thing. It's a real thing. Like this person could see it in me. And even though he was not ready to personally give his life over to the Lord that night, but so she got to share and to witness, and that somebody could see within her the way that it made her life different. That she was a woman who was so in love with the presence of God within her. And the funny thing is, about love, my husband and I were watching this like kind of silly show recently. There was this woman, and she was a arms dealer, so she sold guns to bad guys, okay? And so she ends up falling in love with another bad guy. She gets pregnant, and she has this line, though, that I loved, where she said that, when people think that when you become a mother, that it makes you soft. And she said, no, it makes you more fierce than you have ever been before. That there's something within us as women, this maternal instinct, whether you're a mom yet or not, there's something in us that when we're in love, when we are madly in love, that we are ready to fight and to defend. That when you're in love, it's a funny thing, like you guys have probably experienced it within your friendships, maybe within your family, that when somebody that you care about is hurting, is suffering, it can feel more difficult for you in your heart than if you were the one that was going through it yourself. That we have this capacity for love. So, I shared last night about my my relationship with animals, how I'm not really a fan. And I think that part of that is that I have the most random animal attack stories from my youth. So I'll share one of those with you guys this morning. I was probably like 10 years old, and we were at a farm, and that like was a friend of my dad's or something. And so they're like talking about grown-up stuff. They're like, oh, Katie, walk around, check it out. So I'm walking around, and I apparently got too close to the nest of a goose where she had laid her eggs. I never saw the nest. I didn't see anything. I'm just walking around like minding my own business. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere comes this like vicious, bloodthirsty goose, all right? And it's got like its wings out, and it's like, rah! And it's coming at me and attacks me, this goose. And so it's biting me with its beak, and it bit onto my leg, onto my jeans, and I'm screaming, and I'm trying to like get this goose off of me, and its goose body is like flailing all over, and they had to come and, take its savage jaws off of my leg, But so, spoiler alert, I lived, all right? But I have this image, like it's crazy because I'm not an animal fan. I don't like geese, obviously, in a special way ever since then. But I also sort of feel like this goose is my spirit animal. That like all, mother goose stories, that there's a moral within it. Like for me, I am ready to protect and defend at all costs. That there's something about us as women that can kind of make us a little bit scary. I'm not just talking about like the once a month kind of scary, like the estrogen bomb kind of time or whatever. But there's something within us that we gotta fight, man. There's something within us that when you experience your friend who has their heart broken, or somebody talking trash about a member of your family, or maybe you could think about a time when you're at the playground with your siblings and somebody like shoved your little brother or sister, and you're like, I'm the only one allowed to do that, That there's something in us where our love comes alive, and we are not asking what is going to happen to me if I do this. What's going to happen to me if I defend or I protect? What's going to happen to me if I nurture? We're asking what's going to happen to them if I don't. My personal experience of this, of my friends in high school, I shared last night about the difficult times that I went through with my parents' divorce. And when I was growing up, all through elementary, middle school, high school, I had the same group of friends, and they were awesome. They were so good. They were so kind. They had a great moral compass. They were super fun. But around my sophomore year, I ended up meeting this different group of girls at my church and through retreats and conferences and things like that. And they were just different. There was something different about those friendships where all of a sudden we're praying for each other, we're praying with each other, we're having conversations about the Lord. And so when this happened, when my dad left, my school friends were so kind. They were so good to me, and they tried to distract me, and they tried to make me feel better. But my church friends, on the other hand, they did all of those things as well. But it wasn't enough for them. That they wanted to enter into my suffering with me. They wanted to hurt with me. They wanted to cry with me. These were the friends that at the moments where I didn't even know how to get to Jesus myself, that they would drag me there. And in so many ways, when I think about this, I think about how these friends saved me in so many ways, that they loved me enough to defend me and to fight for me. And this doesn't mean that we are only called to be friends with Christians, but what it does mean is that we are called to a different level of friendship. We're called to be a different kind of friend. If we really love Jesus, if we really love the people in our lives. I'll share another story with you. This is actually a story about a young man, but I'll let it slide because it's one of my favorites. And a story about what it is to love like this. So in youth ministry, we had a program of our juniors and seniors where they were kind of like the lead kind of thing, and they were involved in like everything, every aspect. So there was this great group of girls. They would come to all the things, and a great group of guys. And there was one guy in particular, his name was Johnny. And Johnny was really close with a lot of these girls, really close friends. So he discovered that this group of girls had all decided that they were going to go to the movies together, and they were all going to go see a movie called Magic Mike. So for those of you who don't know, Magic Mike is a movie about, it was like all the best looking actors at the time, and they're strippers in this movie, right? So Johnny is like so upset. He's totally distraught. And so he calls me and he's like, tells me the scenario, and he's like, I have been begging them. I told them I will do whatever. I'm like telling them all the reasons why this is a horrible idea, and they're like so angry. They're like, Johnny, we're so mature. We've heard all the chastity talks. We can totally handle this. And so they're so mad, and he's like, Katie, what are we going to do? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what we're going to do. Like, what do you want me to do? Like, go lay on their car or something like that? Like, you told them all the things. They know. They know. You know, you've said all the right things, and they know better themselves. Now what we're going to do, Johnny, is we're going to pray. We're going to fight for them on our knees. He didn't sound like he liked that answer very much. So I found out later, he hung up the phone, and he got on his phone, and he looked up what time the movie was starting. He knew what movie theater that they were going to. Next step, he looked up to see the duration of that movie, how long it was going to last. At the very moment that his friends were walking into the movie theater, he drove to our parish, to our adoration chapel, and stepped foot in front of the Eucharist at that exact moment. He stayed on his knees, going to battle for his friends for the entire duration of the movie. Excellent love. Love that fights. Many years passed, and one of these girls was at my house. She's like married and has kids now and stuff, and I was telling her this story, and she didn't know, none of them. He never mentioned it to them. He didn't tell any of them, and she said, Katie, you're not going to believe this. She said, not far into the movie, we left. And not all of them left. The girls who had driven, they had all ridden together. The girls who had driven had stayed in the theater, so they were waiting outside in the Houston sun on this bench, and they're talking, and they're like, yeah, this was a really bad idea. Johnny was right. And they all made each other a promise that day. We will never, ever, ever tell Johnny. So she left my house that day, and I'm like, Johnny, guess what? Like, you're not going to believe it. And he was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe all of these years later that the Lord allowed me to see this, allowed me to know. And you know what, y'all, this is what it looks like. And are we willing to fight? Are we willing to defend? Are we willing to really, truly love as the women that God has called us to be? Because you know what, I bet if you made a list of 100% of the people that you know and love, that 99% of them have no one that's willing to love them like that. No one that's willing to fight for them. No one that's willing to enter into their suffering, to drag them to Jesus. And you know what Johnny experienced is, in this kind of a moment, not everybody's going to even want to be loved like that. To which I think Jesus responds, welcome to my life. But we ask ourselves, not what's going to happen to me if I do, but what is going to happen to them if I don't. This is the kind of friendship that God is calling us to, but it's also the kind of friendship that he wants for us to have with him. To be women in love with him, to be his friend, for us to draw nearer to him so that he can teach us how to love. I'll share another story with you guys this morning. It's a story that you've probably all heard from the scriptures, and this is a story of the woman who comes and she washes Jesus' feet with her tears and she dries them with her hair. And so when we have the context of the story, what's happening is Jesus is at the house of the Pharisees, some of the most prestigious men, in their community, and he's having dinner there. They're all reclining at table, and this woman comes in and she falls at Jesus' feet and she's weeping. Now, we've heard this reading read, probably, at Mass or whatever, but let's think about this for a second. Let's say you go home and it's Monday night and you're all having dinner and all of a sudden this woman comes bursting through your front door, all right, uninvited, and she falls at your dad's feet and she's crying and she's washing his feet with her tears and drying them with her hair. You're like, 911. Like, this is crazy. Like, we look at this scenario and it is a chaotic, crazy moment, all right? And so here's this woman, and she's there with the Lord, and he's looking at her, and they're having this, incredible, intimate moment. And then we cue the Pharisees, whose main job in the scripture, I think, is, ruining that moment. And so what the Pharisees say is they look at Jesus and this woman, and they say, if Jesus knew, if he was really a prophet, then he would know what kind of woman this is. And if he knew that, he wouldn't even let her touch him. The scripture doesn't tell us what this woman has done. We can let our minds wander about that, but we know she's a sinner, and we know that she's the type of sinner that everybody else knows about. And you know what else we know is so are we. That we come here today with this gift of purity that God has given us. We have our sins and we have our shame. That we come before Jesus and we don't know what kind of sin she had, and I don't know what kind of sins are in this room, but maybe her sins, maybe some of our sins are sins of impurity. Maybe they're sins of the way that we've dressed or ways that we've flirted inauthentically, just looking for attention. Maybe it's jokes that we've told that are inappropriate. Maybe it's things that we've looked at online, ways that we've touched others or allowed ourselves to be touched. Maybe it's not those kinds of things. Maybe it's gossip. Maybe it's disrespect. Maybe it's being dishonest, always feeling like we're right, sins of pride. All of these different ways that we have wounded ourselves. And I would be willing to bet that most of us in this room, when we think about ourselves, we think just like the Pharisees. That we identify ourselves with our shame, with our brokenness, with the things that we've done, the things that we hate about ourselves. That this is what we see. And ladies, the way we see ourselves, the way that we understand our dignity and our worth, it matters. If we're serious at all about wanting to know Jesus more, about wanting to be holy, about wanting to grow as Christians, this is a moment where we have to look at our self-image. It matters. And it matters specifically for two reasons. The first of these is because if you don't love yourself, you're going to spend your entire life looking for people who aren't going to love you either. That people who see themselves as God sees them, perfectly as God sees them, they don't sin. They don't have a reason to fall into peer pressure. They don't wonder about what other people are doing or if they're missing out on something or what other people are thinking about them. They're not worried about the inside joke that they're not a part of. They're not worried about anything else. They don't need to medicate their pain. They're completely free. If we want to grow in holiness, we have to grow in this area. And the second reason why this is so important is because if we say, Lord, I believe in you, I believe in your word, I believe in what you say, but what you say about me, you're wrong, or you're not really telling the truth, that we have problems with our image of God. We have problems with who God is, our relationship with God. I remember hearing a long time ago, if we're worshiping a God like that, we're actually worshiping an idol. If we think that this is the way that God sees us, is the way that we see us in our own disgust of ourselves and the ways that we hate ourselves. If we want to know God, we have to grow in this area. And I bring this to you this morning, not, so that we can sing kumbaya and we can hug and we can look at each other and be like, you're beautiful. No, you're beautiful. And then we can all gag, this is not at all this idea of this cliche kind of an idea of our beauty and our goodness and our worth. This is essential for us in our holiness. That St. Gregory the Great, he has a quote where he says that if we could see ourselves as God sees us, that we would be tempted to bow down and worship. That this is our goodness. So I want to bring you back, flashback to this story of the woman in this moment. And so here is Jesus and this woman, and they're looking at each other and they're gazing at each other. And she has brought all of her stuff, right? And the scripture gives us this really particular detail about it. It says that she brought with her a box that was made out of alabaster. And when she brought this box, to us it doesn't necessarily mean much, but to the Jewish people, this would have jumped off the page because in their tradition, at the time that a baby girl was born, their parents would buy for them this box that was made out of this precious stone called alabaster. And they would fill that box with a perfumed oil that she would save for her entire life until her wedding. Now, this box cost about 1 year's salary. So it was the most precious thing that she owned. And so we can think about this and realize, like, this woman, she heard about Jesus. Maybe she heard him speak. Maybe somebody told her about his message. And all of a sudden, she felt this fire inside of her. Like these emotions and this experience that it was like her bones couldn't even contain it. And she does something reckless. She does something insane. She goes home and she finds the most precious thing that she has. And she goes bursting through the door, uninvited, of a public figure. And she falls at the feet of Jesus and she breaks that box at his feet. And the symbolism of this moment is here she comes and she says, Jesus, I am giving you all of myself. Everything that has come from my past, everything in my present, all of my future, I am all in. Right here, Lord, I'm putting it all at your feet. All of the shame, all of the fear, all of the sin. And Jesus, he looks on her with love. And I can only imagine as he lifts her face to his and gazes into her eyes, not only what was happening in her heart, but what was happening in his. That before she came through that door, he was waiting. He knew that she was coming. And that heart that created the universe was bursting with love over this woman. And you know what we see in the story is that she never speaks. She doesn't say a single word because she doesn't have to. That Jesus is her knight in shining armor, that he comes to her rescue, and he speaks to the lies of the devil. He speaks to the lies of the Pharisees in her life. And what he says to her is that you are forgiven because you have loved much. She's one of the first women in love with Jesus in the scriptures, but this is also one of the first recorded confessions in all of history. That she comes and she brings all of her mess. She brings it to Jesus, holding nothing back. That she brings him all of her shame, all of her past, all of her worries. And she lays it at the feet of the Lord. And you know, Jesus didn't come and give his life just so that he could retie these bows and tape this box back up. What Jesus does for this woman is what he does for us. That it's not just enough for him to give us this cosmetic fix, but that when we meet Jesus in the sacrament of reconciliation, he does what he promises in the book of Revelation. He says, behold, I make all things new. That the God of the universe who created everything with his breath sees it as no big thing to recreate us, to show us our goodness, to show us our purity, to show us how he sees us. And every single time that I give this talk, I'll have a girl that comes up afterwards, at least one, who will say, so you're saying that if I go to confession, that the Lord will give me a new gift? Yes. And she'll say, so like a new gift? Yes. So like new? Yes. That is what I am saying. That this is who our God is. The God who sees you, who knows you, who loves you, and who just wants to be there in case you will give him that love in return.